Welcome to the AI Storyteller. Doug's day started not with a bang, but with the monotonous beep of his alarm, a sound as ingrained in his morning routine as the act of breathing. He lay in his bunk for a moment longer, the low hum of the space tow truck's engines a familiar background noise in the vast, silent expanse of space. Outside his tiny porthole, the endless black speckled with distant stars had long lost its novelty. With a sigh, Doug silenced the alarm and pushed himself out of the narrow bed, his movements in the ship's low gravity practiced and uninspired. The cold metal floor provided a jarring start to his day, a daily discomfort he'd grown used to. He shuffled to the compact washroom, his movements echoing softly in the quiet cabin. The ritual of splashing his face with water, recycled from the ship's reserves, did little to invigorate him. Instead, the floating droplets, momentarily defying gravity, served as a reminder of his isolation. Dressed in his uniform, the fabric frayed at the cuffs and the zipper stubborn, Doug faced the day with a resigned acceptance. It was another day in space, marked not by new discoveries or adventures, but by the same repetitive tasks and the endless void outside. Seated in the cockpit, Doug initiated the day's first task with the same disinterest that colored every morning. The console before him came to life, its screens a familiar sight, displaying a series of checks and diagnostics to ensure the tow truck was ready for another day in the void. The vista outside, an infinite expanse of space, had become as mundane to Doug as an old faded wallpaper. Today's assignment was straightforward: retrieve a small cargo pod that had drifted off course from its convoy. Such tasks were the staple of Doug's work, offering little in the way of excitement or variety. With a few practiced keystrokes, he set the coordinates and engaged the thrusters, his mind already wandering to other, more mundane concerns. The journey to the cargo pod was uneventful, a straight shot through the emptiness of space. Doug maneuvered his tow truck with ease, the controls familiar under his fingers. The retrieval of the pod was executed with a precision that came from routine, each step a well-rehearsed dance requiring minimal thought or effort. Mealtimes aboard the tow truck were solitary affairs, marked not by the convivial chatter of companions, but by the soft hum of the ship's systems. Doug's meals, pre-packaged and designed for efficiency rather than taste, were consumed with little enthusiasm. As he ate, his gaze would occasionally drift to the viewport, the endless void beyond offering no comfort or distraction. The stars, with their cold, distant light, seemed indifferent to the small drama of his existence. The afternoon stretched before Doug with the same monotonous predictability as the morning. The cabin's silence was occasionally broken by the crackle of the communications system, a lifeline to the bustling activity of the galaxy. These brief interludes of distant voices served as a stark reminder of his isolation, the conversations of ships passing in the night, offering little in the way of meaningful connection. A routine distress call momentarily disrupted the tedium, a passenger vessel experiencing minor engine troubles. Doug's response was automatic, his movements as he prepared for the tow lacking any sense of urgency or concern. The exchange with the vessel's crew, conducted over the impersonal medium of the comm system, was brief and perfunctory. The pleasantries exchanged were devoid of warmth, the interaction as mechanical as the tow itself. With the passenger vessel securely in tow, Doug set a course back to the nearest space station. The journey was as unremarkable as the one that had brought him to the stranded ship. Space stretched out in all directions, a vast canvas of nothingness, punctuated only by the distant twinkle of stars and the occasional passing freighter. Doug's thoughts during the journey were not on the vastness of space or the wonders it might hold, but rather on the more mundane aspects of his life. He found himself pondering the state of his dwindling supply of coffee, the overdue maintenance on the tow truck's thrusters, and the monotonous cycle of sleep, work, and meals that constituted his existence. The process of docking with the space station and transferring the towed vessel to the repair bay was executed with practiced ease. Doug's interactions with the station personnel were brief and impersonal, limited to the necessary exchange of documents and the perfunctory pleasantries of spaceport etiquette. Back in the solitude of his tow truck, Doug completed the paperwork associated with the job, each form filled out with a detachment that mirrored his feelings toward his work. The completion of one task merely signaled the beginning of another in an endless cycle of routine that offered little in the way of satisfaction or fulfillment. As he settled in for the night, the confines of his cabin felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. The familiar hum of the engines and the soft glow of the instrument panel were poor substitutes for company. Sleep, when it came, was a welcome escape from the tedium, a brief respite in the endless cycle of his day-to-day existence. The following morning, Doug awoke to the relentless beep of his alarm, the sound indistinguishable from every other day. The routine that followed felt more like a series of mechanical motions than the start of a new day. He navigated the cramped space of his cabin with a familiarity born of repetition, each step from his bunk to the washroom and then to the cockpit carried out with a resignation that had long since replaced any sense of anticipation. As the day progressed, Doug found himself drifting, not just through the vast expanse of space, but through his own thoughts as well. The solitude of his profession, once a chosen companion, had become an oppressive presence, the silence of the cabin punctuated only by the occasional, impersonal transmissions that crackled through the comm system. Lunch was a muted affair, the tasteless meal consumed with little regard for flavor or enjoyment. The view from the cockpit, an endless parade of stars and darkness, offered no distraction from the monotony. Doug's thoughts wandered aimlessly, touching upon the mundane realities of his life, the state of his supplies, the routine maintenance tasks that awaited him, and the endless cycle of sleep and work that defined his existence. The afternoon brought with it a sense of déjà vu, another distress signal from another anonymous vessel adrift in the void. The routine was familiar, the execution methodical. Doug's interaction with the crew of the stranded ship was efficient and devoid of any real connection. The tow back to the station was completed with the same sense of disengagement that had come to characterize Doug's approach to his work. As the station came into view, Doug felt a momentary flicker of relief at the prospect of human interaction, quickly doused by the realization that his exchanges with the station personnel would be as perfunctory and impersonal as every other aspect of his job. The completion of the tow, the handover of the vessel, and the requisite paperwork were all completed with a sense of detachment. Retreating to the solitude of his cabin, Doug's evening routine unfolded with a predictability that mirrored the rest of his day. The simple acts of removing his uniform and preparing for bed were carried out with little thought, the prospect of another identical day looming on the horizon. As he lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, Doug was struck by the realization that his life had become a series of repetitive tasks, each day indistinguishable from the last. The vastness of space, once a canvas of infinite possibilities, had become the backdrop to a life defined by routine and solitude. The cycle of Doug's days continued unbroken, each morning greeting him with the same alarm, the same routine tasks, and the same solitary meals. Space, with its infinite expanse and untold mysteries, had become for him a well-trodden path, its wonders dulled by the monotony of his daily grind. The stars outside his viewport, once beacons of hope and adventure, now seemed to mock him with their distant, unchanging light. On one particular day, indistinguishable from the rest, Doug found himself tasked with a salvage operation in a sector he'd visited countless times before. The job was routine: locate a derelict satellite, secure it for towing, and bring it back to the station for decommissioning. As he set his course and engaged the thrusters, Doug's thoughts were not on the task at hand, but on the trivial, whether he'd remembered to restock his coffee supply or if the next batch of meal packets would offer any variety. The journey to the satellite was completed in silence, the familiar hum of the engines and the occasional blip of the instruments his only companions. The salvage operation, executed with practiced ease, offered no sense of achievement or satisfaction. Each step, from the initial scan to the securing of the tow lines, was carried out with a detachment born of repetition. Returning to the station, Doug felt the weight of the solitude that defined his existence more acutely than ever. The brief exchanges with the station personnel, the completion of the necessary paperwork, and the return to the confines of his cabin unfolded with a predictability that left him feeling both comforted and trapped. The evening passed in a blur of routine activities, from the perfunctory meal to the mindless entertainment that filled the hours before sleep. Lying in his bunk, Doug pondered the endless cycle of his days, each one a mirror of the last, marked by the same tasks, the same solitude, and the same unchanging backdrop of stars and void. As sleep claimed him, Doug wondered if there was more to life than this endless repetition, if beyond the routine and the solitude there lay a possibility for change, for something more than the cycle of tasks that filled his days. But as the darkness of sleep enveloped him, those thoughts faded, lost in the dreams of a man whose life was defined by the unbroken cycle of routine in the vastness of space. Like and subscribe to the AI Storyteller channel for captivating tales that transport you to new worlds and inspire your imagination. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the realms of creativity and storytelling. Remember, stories have the power to connect us all and ignite our imaginations. Let's keep the magic alive together. Like and subscribe.